Hey y'all, in this video I'm going to be doing just a purely informative video on how to identify Aimbot. As a disclaimer, I do not support any hacking of the multiplayer game or any multiplayer game, and any activity that may harm players within a game in any way. Any and all clips included in this video have been volunteered, researched, or will be accredited in the description below. This video is meant only to be informative in the identification of the use of hacks. Identify it, to put it simply. So what is Aimbot? An aimbot is a hack feature which makes your player aim at the enemies automatically. To identify your basic standard aimbot, keep track of the change in viewing direction of players. And using an aimbot will result in very strange behavior which could not be possible using a mouse or a controller. For example, imagine somebody in the game, they're just looking every which way, just snapping back and forth. That is a very clear indicator of aimbot, because they're just snapping unnaturally and they're going right at the person, right towards the person, perfectly aimed. That's a very clear indicator. Alright, let's watch this video, shall we? Here we go. I'm going to skip to a very key part. Okay, so watch this person right here. See how they're turning so quickly right there? Looking back and forth so quickly. See that? Okay, right there. Right here. Let me go back a little in case you missed this. Right here. Watch how he turns towards everyone around him because he's surrounded. Right there, he goes back, forth, back. That accuracy with that sort of snapping is a very clear indicator of the standard basic aimbot. But it can get more difficult to catch. The further it goes, the more natural it can appear. So the idea of a silent aimbot is to send fake aimed coordinates to the server while not editing your actual aim angles locally. So what does this mean? It means that the user of this technique of aimbot can have the appearance of facing one direction while being able to fire in a completely different direction. From a spectator's perspective, the gun will just snap toward the targeted enemy, and then the gun will move back to where it was originally. Here, just to show you, we have a visual aid. This is from the cheater's perspective, and it will eventually move into the spectator's perspective, if the spectator were following him. You would also see it from an external perspective. As you can see, if you look over here, you see the death counters up here. He doesn't need to aim exactly where they are, it still hits them. That is a sign of silent aimbot because it does not actually, without him actually looking towards the guy, it's hitting him directly on. However, when you're spectating, you see that it's a lot more snappy. You see it going back and forth because he just switches so fast. It's just immediate changes. However, that brings us to smooth aimbot. Smooth aimbot simply smooths the transition from your current view angle to the desired view angle, so it wouldn't snap as much. It will more smoothly transition to that area, making for a more realistic sort of aim effect. Basically, it works like someone with their hands on the hacker's shoulders, like turning him smoothly toward the enemy's vicinity. The hacker still attacks for himself, but the hack turns him to where he needs to look, and is therefore a little bit harder to detect. It's sort of like a slower aimbot. While there is not much that a person can do to easily identify this specific form of aimbot, it is still very identifiable through many other signs that it will provide, as will be discussed throughout this video. Now, bloom reversers. So what is a bloom? A bloom is when a gun's bullet spread area increases over time as it's fired, resetting to when you stop firing. That means basically, so when you jump or when you're like moving around, when you shoot, your crosshair will expand. That is a bloom, like when you shoot and it has a wider area. So what does a bloom reverser do? Using a sniper rifle, you have your crosshair there, but the crosshair never opens up. Like if you're jumping, it's still completely dead accurate. That is a bloom reverser's act because it would narrow it down, making sure it never expands. Bloom is not recoil, I want that to be clear. It is a fire expanding over time. So, in less complicated words, the aim of the player stays completely precise no matter what. Okay, so they can lock onto anyone? Is that it? No, and in fact, someone who uses aimbot cannot actually snap on anyone regardless of their location. Why is that? 3 letters for you. FOV. So, FOV, also known as field of vision, is where you see a range of things and the FOV determines how close it looks and how much you see. So if someone has a lower FOV, objects will appear to be stationed closer to the player and easier to hit, but your range of sight will be slightly smaller than a person who has a higher field of view. A person with a higher field of view will have a larger range of vision, but objects and players will appear smaller and will require more precise and accurate aim and skill to be used to the best effect. This is actually often, in many games, is a setting. For instance, games such as even Minecraft has FOV, and you can make it really, really wide, or you can make it so that your FOV is really narrow so you can focus in on something. Now, why does this matter? How does it tie into Aimbot? When a person uses Aimbot, they're limited by their field of view. So the Aimbot will target any enemies within the field of view when the aim key is suppressed. Any enemies on the screen that are not in the field of view will be ignored. As you can see, that guy there, he had to manually turn there, because he could have shot at the guy down there, or he could have shot at the guy behind him. But no, he didn't see those people, so they would not have been in his field of view. They would not have been in his range, and he could not have shot through the wall because he did not have any sort of software that would allow for that. That is not something that works. Like wall hacks, typically that is being confused with ESP. And what is ESP? Well, we're about to talk about that. ESP. What is ESP? ESP is short for extrasensory perception. Obviously, I'm not going to say that big word every time, so I'm just going to say ESP. But a typical ESP hack would show the health, name, and hitbox of an entity that a player without hacks would not be able to see. So how to identify someone when they're using ESP? They have things such as instant spotting. A player using ESP will often be able to spot enemies instantly, even if they're behind cover or at a distance. If they're it depends on the game. Sometimes if they're behind a wall, sometimes if they are in a bush, or in some sort of object that you can walk through but can hide in, that if they see them through that is a sign of ESP. It's not necessarily definitive proof, but that is a sign, because there's a chance people are just getting lucky or genuinely skilled. Just use your best judgment when determining guilt, because otherwise it could end up you misunderstand or you make a mistake and, oh, that guy was just good at the game, or, oh, he just got lucky, I guess. Because feel it's a legitimate thing. People get lucky. Something very commonly seen among aimbotters, particularly in my community, shell shockers. Now, skin hacks, however, contrary to what you might expect, you shouldn't be looking for outlandishly rare items, but rather, when players use skin hacks, it often overrides the original skin coding and results in a default or blank skin. So, in the case of shellshocker.io, it would be a blank white egg normally, with no cosmetics. So, while skin hacks do not impact the game for many games, it can be a helpful indicator when determining whether or not a suspected user is hacking. Almost 9 out of 10 times when I see an aimbotter or anyone hacking, they have a blank skin. Not every time, but 9 out of 10. And I feel personally, that's a very strong indicator for me when someone is hacking. Obviously, if they just have a blank skin, that does not mean they are just hacking. Do not misunderstand that. That just means that they might have a blank skin, and they might just have a default name. They might be a genuine person that's never really played the game or doesn't have an account or isn't signed in. But if you see someone that you think is snapping and they have a blank skin, that is a strong indicator. Not definitive proof, but a strong indicator. So credits to Life of Nurse and Agent Adam for help on making this video. I tried to make this as informative as possible. I did several days of research to make sure this was completely accurate. I know this wasn't the most interesting video, but I hope this helps people who are looking at streaming as a possibility for any shooter game or any moderation of any kind, league events, whatever you're doing. Thank you, and have a nice day, y'all. Take care.